As followers of Jesus, we're called to love our neighbors, but who exactly are our neighbors? Who exactly are we called to love? And what do we do about all those people, real talk, who are kind of hard to love? Well, we're talking about it all today. Well, what's up, Epic Online fam? Thanks for hanging out with us today. If we haven't met yet, my name is Emily and I'm the pastor for Epic Online, and welcome to Epic Everywhere, practical teaching to help you grow in your faith no matter where you're at on your spiritual journey. As we get started today, I want to give a special shout out to everyone who's new here. Hey, whatever brought you, I'm so glad that you made it. Connection really is a big deal to us around here. We want this to be a place where you can be known and where you can know others. So every time we're together, we take time to text in so we can access our Next Steps Hub and stay connected. You can either text the word HERE to 215-999-8575, or you can scan the QR code and we'll send you a link that will give you access to the Hub. The Hub's a place where we house all the resources that we think will help you make the most out of your experience today. Now, for all of you who are new, when you text in for the first time, we've got a free, super comfy t-shirt that we'll mail out to you just to say thanks for being here. So what's up on the Hub today? Well, you'll see a spot at the top where you can let us know how we can pray for you, and a spot where you can give today. All this month, we have an opportunity to give above and beyond our normal giving as a part of our This Is Love initiative. So if you'd like to give to our community outreach partners, you can click Give to This Is Love on the Hub. Well, if you've been with us for a little bit, you know that we're on a 2-year spiritual growth journey as a church called All In. And as we go throughout the next 2 years, we want to encourage you by sharing some updates from people in our church fam. And so to tell you a little bit more about that, take a look at this video.
Hey guys, Justin here. For those I haven't had a chance to meet yet, my name is Justin Dela Cruz, and I get to serve as one of the pastors on our Epic team. I lead our King of Prussia location. What's up, guys? And hey, as many of you know, we are on a journey as a church, a 2-year growth journey. It's called All In, and we're learning how to live our lives as followers of Jesus, being all in, total devotion so that we can reach our full potential. And we began this journey a few months ago, and as we go along, we wanted to be able to share some personal updates. We want you to hear from different people how God is growing us and challenging us and what's happening and some of the wins along the way and the initiatives that we're sharing. And so you'll hear some stories as we go. And I just wanted to share one. I don't want to share it just as a pastor, but as a person, because I'm a part of every person in the city. And so one of the ways that God's been challenging me in All In is to make sure that my faith is not just a Sunday-centered faith, but an everyday faith. And so here I am coming to you from my kitchen table. And this is actually part of how God is growing us in All In. We have opened up our home to host life groups, and we get to talk and meet with people right here at our kitchen table and in our living room and have conversations and learn about how our faith in the Bible applies to not just a Sunday experience, but to everyday life, whether that's us as parents, as a spouse, as an employee, and just in the hobbies and the life that we enjoy. And so I don't know, maybe God will be challenging you to open up your home or to join in a group when they open up next semester. Maybe God's challenging you to take steps in serving other people and living out your faith that way, like joining the Epic Kids team so that you can lead kids and grow our family ministry. Or maybe it's taking steps in generosity to continue giving faithfully so that God can use our gifts to grow his church. There's lots of ways for all of us to be involved. I know that one of the ways that I'm growing is right here at my kitchen table. And I encourage you along the journey as well to keep taking steps of faith, and let's see what God does through it. All right, all in, baby. Let's go.
Hey, thank you to everyone who is a part of All In. If you'd like to join the journey with us, you can find more info over on our website, epic.church/allin. Well, we are right in the middle of This Is Love, where we take the whole month of July to unleash a wave of generosity and love across our city. Many of you are already involved through your giving and volunteering at an outreach project. In fact, If you haven't signed up to volunteer yet, what are you waiting for? We've got a whole list of projects that you can be a part of. Now listen, these projects are happening this week, not next week. They're not happening next month. So now is the time to take action. And for all of you who are outside of the Philly area, we've got ways that you can serve your very own community. And when you show up at one of these projects, you'll get your very own limited edition Red for Philly t-shirt. So if you're outside the Philly area, there's a spot where you can share on the website what you did, and we'll get one of these free tees right to your door. So get signed up for a project through forphilly.com. Well, love is definitely in the air. I'm so excited to see all of you out and about serving with these amazing community outreach projects that are going down. And cool thing is about love, we don't have to wait for an organized project or a special month before we go ahead and love on those around us. In fact, we can make loving others a real regular rhythm in our lives. Up on social media, we're sharing some practical ways that you can spread some love wherever you are. I decided to treat my mom to water ice last week. That's definitely her love language. And as I'm walking up to the order, there's a group of kids in front of me, and I thought, yep, so much for getting out of here on time. And just as I thought that, they said, hey, why don't you go in front of us? We're gonna be a while. They were so kind, and I thought, I should do something kind for them. So I had some extra cash with me. I gave it to the girl at the register, and I said, hey, put this money towards whatever they ordered, and I drove away. Well, that was just something that God placed in my lap, something small, but opportunities to spread love are all around us. In fact, I heard about one that went down at Epic KOP last week. I heard there was somebody who moved into a new house, so a whole group of people from the location showed up on Sunday to help them paint their place. Like, so cool. Way to go, Epic KOP. So what opportunities can you be on the lookout to love others this week? If you don't follow us on Instagram or Facebook or Threads, look for Epic Church Philly and give us a follow. We'll be dropping a whole bunch of ideas on how to love throughout this month. And in today's message, you're going to get even more encouragement on what loving others looks like. You've been strategically placed by God right where you are. He's called you to be his hands and feet, to love your neighbor, to be the one who's known for being generous and willing to share. So who exactly is our neighbor, and what do we do about all those people who aren't exactly easy to love? Let's get to today's message and find out.
Hey everybody, my name's Kent. I'm lead pastor here at Epic, and I'm so glad you're doing church with us today. That's the third week in a series that we do every year called This Is Love, where we come together as a group of churches and unleash a wave of generosity and love in our city through service and giving. And in the beginning of the series, we asked everybody to give something and then to commit to serve in some way. And I gotta tell you, man, just so far, I'm so proud of the way you guys have responded. Really, it's been amazing. And I'm super excited to see and to be able to celebrate the totals at the end of this series. But just so far, I just wanted to say, hey man, way to go. Way to go. Now, if you haven't had a chance to give yet or to sign up to serve, you can still do that. You can just go ahead and text in, and you'll find all the links that you need there on the hub that we text you back. So make sure you do that. Now, as we've been working our way through this series, we've actually been working our way through a verse in 1 Timothy where Timothy was given some instructions about how we as followers of Jesus should do life if we want to do life well. And here's what it says, 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 18. It says, command them to do good, to be rich in good deeds, and to be generous and willing to share. Now in this verse, we see that there's three primary instructions. It starts off, it says, command them. That's us. That's you. That's me. It says, command them to, number one, to do good. Specifically, as we learned in the very first week of the series, that means that to take some of our money and make sure that we do good with it. And we even gave you a small opportunity to be able to do that, to take an action step by asking everybody to give something so that we can give it all away. The second thing it says here is to be rich in good deeds. And that means, as we learned last week, that we should take some of our time and our energy and make sure that we use it to serve the people around us. We even gave you a small opportunity to do that, to commit to serve at some point throughout this series. So if you've done that, way to go. If you haven't, there's still time to. I want to encourage you to do that. And then the third thing we see in this series, which we're going to talk about today, is this: to be generous and willing to share. And so today I want to talk with you about something that I think really hits home for a lot of us, especially those of us who live in and around the city of Philadelphia. I want to spend today talking to you about poverty, because I think this is one of our biggest challenges that we face in our city. It also happens to be one of our biggest opportunities. And my hope is that this message leaves you challenged and leaves you encouraged to be generous and to be willing to share. Now, one of the things I love most about Epic, about our church, is that serving our city has always been a big part of who we are. Whenever we started the church, one of the very first things we did was go to a homeless shelter for families, and we threw this huge party. It was in the middle of the summer. There were burgers and hot dogs and face painting and games and balloons. It was a blast. We had a lot of fun. And I'll never forget what the director of the shelter said to me before we left. She put a group of us together, and she said this. She says, "This is amazing." And honestly, it wasn't that amazing. I mean, we just, pulled together and put a little energy into making this thing as fun as we could make it, but it wasn't anything outlandish. But she said it was amazing nonetheless. And she said this: "So many of the people that we serve here feel like the whole world is against them. But what you've done today helped them know that that's not true." And early on, I walked away just believing and knowing that this kind of thing was just always going to be a part of who we are. And then we did this big Mother's Day makeover for a single mom in Roxborough. And I'll never forget, I definitely felt like we bit off more than we could chew. We helped kind of rehab parts of her home, bought her new appliances, we did new paint, we fixed the floor, which I didn't even know you could fix the floor, but we fixed the floor. Somebody knew how to do that. We put a swing set up in the backyard and a garden. And I just remember watching her two little girls swing on that swing set. And I was just like, oh man, this is all worth it. It was awesome. Then we did a bunch of projects for some schools, like creating some teacher lounge areas where they could just kind of have a place to relax and unwind. We made dinner for those that are for cancer patients at the Ronald McDonald House just outside of Philly. And what was impactful about that was I remember being at one dinner, and I was talking to one of the patients there, one of the residents, and she says, we love it when you guys come. Because when you're not here and we have to go out to eat, it can be a little awkward because people stare. She was wearing a rag on her head because of the treatment. I just remember thinking, oh man, just to be in those shoes and imagine what she may be going through, and just love the opportunity to be able to serve. And so over the years, we've always just found a way to serve our city, to serve the people around us. And that's grown into some really big and awesome things, some things that we love dearly, like Night to Shine, which is a prom that we throw every year for people with disabilities. It's an amazing time. Or what we're doing right now through This Is Love, all these different projects and giving money and then giving it away, all of that. Thousands and thousands of hours have been served over the years, and thousands of dollars have been given away. It's been amazing to me to think about how just a handful of people throwing a barbecue for some kids at the back of a little shelter has led to all of this. It's really incredible. And so over the years, we've had all kinds of opportunities and we've done all kinds of things. But at some point, we've been talking about how we need to focus on one main thing. Not because we want to do less, but because we want to do more, just do it better. Listen, there's a lot of needs in Philadelphia. Throw a rock and you'll hit a need. But I think a better question than just like, what could we do, is what should we do? And to help us think about that, I want to take you through Luke chapter 10, where Jesus tells this great little story that I think is going to be super challenging, but also bring some real clarity for all of us. So Luke chapter 10, verse 25, it says this: "On one occasion, an expert in the law stood up to test Jesus." And so there was a group of people at this time who were trying to trap Jesus into saying something where he would discredit himself. And so one day he's teaching, and this lawyer stands up and asks a question. Here's what he says. He says, "Teacher," he asked, "what must I do to inherit eternal life?" Now, if you've ever seen Law and Order, you know how this works. Like, a good lawyer never asks a question that he doesn't already know the answer to. And Jesus knew that as well. And so he kind of turns it back on this guy. I want you to look what he said. Verse 26, he says, "What is written in the law?" he replied. "How do you read it?" In other words, Jesus is like, "Hey, what do you think?" He answered, talking about the lawyer. The lawyer said, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your mind. And love your neighbor as yourself. You have answered correctly, Jesus replied. Do this and you will live. Now, I don't know if this lawyer just really loved Quizzo, or if he was just kind of a sucker for a little validation and was really excited that Jesus told him he had answered correctly. But all of a sudden here in this passage, we see that he kind of changes his tune a little bit. Now, instead of trying to trap Jesus by asking him this question, he realizes that Jesus might actually be right about this whole eternal life thing. And so now instead of being so how can I have eternal life? And, setting him up, he's like, no, really, how can I have eternal life? He's trying to find what the real answer is. I want you to look what happens next, verse 29. It says, but he wanted to justify himself. And so he asked Jesus, and who is my neighbor? He's like, look, I get the first part of this, love God with all my heart, soul, mind, and strength. Yeah, put him first in my life. I totally understand that. But if this love your neighbor as yourself stuff is important too, then I'm going to need to know who exactly that is. You know what I'm saying? Who is my neighbor? You see, this guy realized that depending on who Jesus said his neighbor was, he may or may not have been doing this whole thing right or wrong, right? And so if you think about it, we wonder the same thing, don't we? We wonder, who exactly is our neighbor? Who exactly are we responsible to love? Our friends, our family, are we responsible to love them? Is that the group? Is that who our neighbor is? Is it our physical neighbors? Come on, we don't even know all their names, Is it the people that we work with? We don't even like a lot of the people that we work with. Is it them? Is that who we need to love, right? And see, just like us, there were some people in his life that he wanted to justify as his neighbor. And there were some people in his life that he wanted to justify as not being his neighbor. There are some people, if we're honest, that we would like to not have to love. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah, it's true. And then get this, instead of just answering the question, I want you to look at what Jesus does. Verse 30. It says, in reply, Jesus said, a man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho when he was attacked by robbers. It's wait, what? He just launches into a story? Yeah, Jesus did this all the time. People would ask him a question, and Jesus would be like, sit back, once upon a time. And he just kind of launch into a story to answer their question ultimately, but he would kind of launch into a story to get there. He goes on, he says this, he says, hey, a man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho when he was attacked by robbers. Here's what the robbers did. They stripped him of his clothes. They beat him and went away, leaving him half dead. So here, this is a terrible situation. This guy's left on the side of the road, half dead. Verse 31, a priest happened to be going down the same road. And when he saw the man, let's stop right there. Listen, this is a priest. He's a pastor. He's a holy man. He's someone who's supposed to be close to God. He sees this man dying, naked, bleeding to death on the side of the road in the middle of nowhere. And surely we would expect him to do something about it. But it says that he saw the man, and Jesus goes on and says, he passed by on the other side. Now, we don't know what he thought whenever he saw the man, but here's what we do know. He saw that man, and then he thought of a reason why it would be better for him to just not get involved. And he passed by on the other side. Verse 32, it says, so too a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him. So now this isn't a priest. Levites aren't priests, but they're also a pretty big deal. These are like the church people. These are the people that help make church happen every single week. And so they showed up, and whenever they saw him, Jesus says that they passed by on the other side, just like the priest did. And again, we don't know exactly what went through their mind when they saw this man dying on the side of the road, but we do know that they saw him, and then they thought of a reason why it would be best for them to just not get involved. Verse 33, he says, but a Samaritan, as he traveled, came where the man was. And everyone listening at this point in the story they're all leaning in, and they thought to themselves, wait. A Samaritan? What's a Samaritan doing in this story? You see, Samaritans were outcasts. They were looked down upon, so much so that Jewish people at the time would go around Samaria the long way so they wouldn't come into contact with the Samaritan. And so this was like a surprise twist in the middle of this story, right? He introduces a Samaritan to the story. So he says, a Samaritan came by, and it says, and when he saw him, notice, all three of these people saw the exact same thing. But this man has a different response. Jesus says that when he saw him, he took pity on him. Like instead of coming up with reasons why it would just be best for him to not get involved, he took pity on him. His heart was moved with compassion for him. And I don't know exactly why. Maybe it was because he was a Samaritan. And so he knew what it felt like to be marginalized or dismissed or beat down. It says that he went to him, and get this, he bandaged his wounds, which was a dangerous thing to do because these robbers could come back at any moment. And then it says he poured on oil and wine, which was a caring thing to do in order to address this man's pain. And then it says he put the man on his own donkey, which was a difficult thing to do. I don't know if you've ever had to lift someone up or move a person from one place to another, but it's not an easy task at all. It was a difficult thing to do. And it says he brought him to an inn and he took care of him, which was an inconvenient thing to do because remember, this man was traveling. So I'm sure he had places to go, places to be. He was on his way somewhere, but he did an inconvenient thing and took care of this man. It says the next day, he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper. And then look what he says. He says, look after him, he said. And when I return, I will reimburse you for any extra expense you may have, which was an expensive thing to do. But he did it anyway. And I'm telling you, whenever Jesus was telling this part of the story, the people who were there hearing this, listening to this, were amazed at the Samaritan's generosity. And then Jesus pulls out of the story and he ties it back to their question. Who is my neighbor? Verse 36. Which of these 3 do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of robbers? It's quizzo time again. And I'm telling you, the lawyer is excited. He's pumped about it. So it says this, the expert in the law replied, the one who had mercy on him. Jesus told him, go and do likewise. You see, this is what Jesus was trying to say. He was saying to this guy, hey, listen, stop worrying about who is or isn't your neighbor and just be one. Stop getting hung up on who is or isn't your neighbor and just be a neighbor. It says you travel down the road of life and see people who need help. Stop thinking about all the reasons why it would be best for you to just not get involved. And maybe that's too dangerous or too difficult or too inconvenient or too expensive. Instead, just be willing to leverage who you are and what you have for the good of others. So what I love about the Samaritan is that whenever he saw a need that he could meet, he met it. It was that simple. When he saw a need that he could meet, he met it. Jesus says, that's what it means to love your neighbor. Go and do likewise. He says, open your eyes, he says. Whenever you see a need that you can meet it. You see, as followers of Jesus, we're called to love our neighbors. We're called to love the people that we meet along the road of life. And here's the thing, though, like we don't often run into people who've been robbed by bandits and left for dead. But we do run into people every day who've been robbed in other ways, particularly if you live in or around Philadelphia. And gang, if we would just be willing to open up our eyes as we look around our city, you know what we'd see? We'd see poverty all around us. In fact, I think that poverty is our man on the side of the road. And I think we've got to make a choice. Are we going to pass by on the other side and think of a bunch of reasons why it would just be best we just not get involved? Or are we going to do something about it? Now, let me share some statistics with you real quick. According to Pew Research, Philadelphia continues to have the highest poverty rate among the nation's largest cities. In short, Philadelphia has the distinction of being the poorest large city in America. 23% of Philadelphians, 1 out of 4 almost, live below the poverty line. That's a household of 4 living on less than $26,000 a year. And 11% of Philadelphians live in what's classified as deep poverty, which is a household of 4 living on less than $13,000 a year. I don't even know how that's possible, but it's true. In all, more than 364,000 people in our city live in poverty, many of whom, get this, are children. And that just sounds like a really big number, 364,000. You got to remember that every number has a name. Every name is a story, and every single story matters to God. And so here's, I think, a question that we should ask ourselves. What about those kids? Like, what about those children? And what about their stories? Gang, that's our man on the side of the road. Those kids and their families. Like so many of them have been robbed of a parent, or robbed of opportunity, or robbed of knowing where their next meal is going to come from, or robbed of literacy, robbed of community, robbed of having mentors in their life and people who believe in them, robbed of having someone to advocate for them, get them the resources that they need in order to succeed in life. And I know it's super complicated, and we could talk all day long about all the reasons why this is happening. In fact, if you're more liberal, then you probably say, it's a systemic problem. Like we aren't giving these kids what they ought to have. Poor kids don't have the same opportunity as other kids. If you fix that, we fix the problem. And if you're more conservative, you'd say, no. It's because of the breakdown of the family. Like we aren't giving these kids the kind of safe family environment and the support structure that they need in order to succeed. Fix that and you'll fix the problem. The truth is that you're both right and you're both wrong because it's way more complicated than that. And we need both of those things. Like even if conservatives and liberals can never agree on why this is happening, I think the one thing that we can all agree on is that it's not those kids' fault. Like it is not the 5-year-old's fault that he was born into a family with poor circumstances instead of being born into another family with better circumstances. Like it is not the kid's fault that because of where they were born, they have 1/100th of the chance of having a decent life than other kids who were born in other situations. Listen, that is an inequitable distribution of opportunity and resources. Like those are just the facts. And for the most part, middle and upper class people have looked at those needs and for whatever reason have talked ourselves, including me, out of doing anything about it. Like we're just like, come with some reason why it would be best for us to just not get involved, right? It's true. We just walk by on the other side of the road, give ourselves a reason and walk away. Gang, that's not just a lack of compassion. That's injustice. And it ain't fair. It just isn't. Is the breakdown of the family a cause? Yes. Are there systemic issues at play? Yes. It's both. Which is why it's so complicated and why it's going to take all of us to do something about it. So what do we do about it? But Tim Keller, who is a pastor of a church in the heart of New York City for years and years and years, he actually recently just passed. He says that we can respond to poverty in 3 ways, and all of them are really important. The first one's this: provide relief. This means to look for opportunities to help someone directly by meeting an immediate need. This is the whole "I was hungry and you gave me something to eat" thing, right? That's meeting an immediate need. You can do that for individuals as you see opportunities around you, or there are lots of great organizations in our city that are doing that kind of work all the time that you can be involved with. And so serve at a shelter, or help pack and deliver meals, or help rehab a home, or give money to provide something that meets an immediate need for somebody else, right? In fact, the serve opportunities that we've given you with different community outreach partners in our city this month, that was meant and designed to introduce you to these great organizations around our city that are doing great work. So I want to encourage you, as you participate with them, just be looking around and see if there's a place where you might be able to fit. The second thing we can do is this: invest in development. This is different than meeting an immediate need. Like this is giving someone what they need so they can succeed in the future, not just in the moment, right? It's not just giving a man a fish, but actually teaching a man how to fish so he'll be able to provide for himself. So it's things like job training and scholarship money and education and teaching children to read. It's leveraging your relational network on another person's behalf. In other words, you're giving other people access to relationships that they wouldn't have had on their own, but you help them make those connections to other people that are going to be able to help them. It's being a big brother or big sister or being a mentor. Here's the thing you need to know about investing in development. It's harder, it's more expensive, and it takes longer, but investing in that kind of a way, that's the thing that pays off long after you stopped investing. It's really important. The third thing that Keller says is that we can work towards reform and systemic change. That means that as individuals, we should look at the social system We should look at our laws. We should look at the way things in our city operate and then fight for justice and equity for every man, woman, and child. Well, for some of you, that actually means running for office or getting involved in government. Like some of you have the aptitude and the ability to do that kind of thing. And so, you should consider that. For others, it means helping to, in some way, to help create new policy and be a champion for reform. Listen, there's a lot of complexity and nuance to all of these issues, but there are also a lot of ways to help. I was speaking with a councilman, and he talked about how tax policy actually has hurt the number of high-paying jobs that are available in our city. That's something that could be addressed. If you speak to educators, they'll tell you how important it is that children learn how to read by a certain age. So being involved in that way is one way you can help. There's this great book that champions investing in development. It's called When Helping Hurts, because oftentimes, instead of a hand out, people just need a hand up. Adoption, preferably in the same community that the child is from, is another key way to help and make a difference. Support for single parents is a really big deal because often there's single parents who are working 2 and 3 jobs just to figure out how to put food on the table. And they don't have the time to then advocate for their children outside of that and the other things that they need. Being a good neighbor, not moving out of the city just because you can, is another way you can help be part of helping things in the city. There's a need for strong role models, for mentors, for relationships. There's a need for knowledge transfer, for financial literacy. There's a need to help strengthen the families around us. That's one way that we as a church in particular can step in and help. That's why it's important that we have strong kids ministry. We have a strong student ministry. We've got leaders in those areas that are investing in the kids that are part of those programs. Because there are some kids who don't have the support outside of that. And they can find, in some ways, like a surrogate family there in those types of environments. It's so, so important. Now, honestly, I just said a bunch of things. Listen, it's so big, it's so overwhelming, it's so multifaceted, and there's so many layers to it that it almost makes you want to give up before you even get started. But gang, we can't. Because poverty is our man on the side of the road. Poverty is our neighbor, those kids, those families. And as followers of Jesus, I'm called to love my neighbor. I can do that by providing relief when I see the opportunity. I can do that by investing in development. I can do that by working towards reform and systemic change. But the one thing I can't do is nothing. As a follower of Jesus, the one thing I can't do is nothing. And I think that was Jesus's point in telling this story. He said, hey, stop worrying about who is or isn't your neighbor. Just be one. Do something. Whatever you do, don't do nothing. James, the brother of Jesus, actually talks a lot about this in the book of James. James chapter 2, starting verse 14, he says this. He says, what good is it, my brothers and sisters, if someone claims to have faith but has no deeds? Can such faith save them? And then he goes on to talk about these deeds. He says, suppose a brother or sister is without clothes or daily food. If one of you says to them, go in peace, keep warm and well fed, but does nothing about their physical need, what good is it? He says, hey, if you see a brother or sister with a physical need and you just give them words, that's not love. Then verse 17 of chapter 2 says, in the same way, faith by itself, if it is not accompanied by action, is dead. He says, hey, if you say you're a follower of Jesus, but you're not moved to act out of compassion for the poor, then something is wrong. You've got a dead faith, he says. He's saying, hey, we're called to love our neighbor. And so there should be some social mercy, justice aspect that flows out of us as a result of our faith in Jesus. So here's the question I want us to think about this week as we consider all of these things. What can you do to meet the needs around you? What can you do to meet the needs around you? Can you provide relief? Can you invest in development? Can you work for reform? The only thing we can't do is nothing. Because there's a million reasons why we should engage. But probably the most compelling is that no matter how wealthy you are or how well off you are compared to others, the truth is that because of sin, every single one of us is spiritually poor. And gang, there's nothing we can do in and of ourselves to change that. Like spiritually, we're bankrupt. Spiritually, we're broke. Like if we were to reach down into our pockets, we've got nothing but lint. Because of sin, there's nothing that we can do in and of ourselves. There's no way that we can be good enough to work our way to heaven. Spiritually, we're that man on the side of the road. We're the ones who need a savior. We're the ones who need someone to come and rescue us. And I'm so glad that Jesus didn't look at us in our condition and think, well, they probably did something to end up in that way. They don't deserve my help. They haven't earned my help. What if they take advantage of me? I'm so glad he didn't do that. No, when we didn't deserve it, when we couldn't have earned it, when we least expected it, Jesus refused to just pass by on the other side of the road. No, he helped us. 2 Corinthians chapter 8, verse 9, it says this, though he was rich, yet for your sake he became poor. In other words, he took on our sin so that you, through his poverty, might become rich. Gang, when we were spiritually broke, when we didn't qualify for a loan because we had nothing, he stepped in and he was generous toward us. He gave his life and made a way for us to be forgiven. He saw our need and then he did something about it. All I'm saying is that we should do the same. So let me ask you again, what can you do to meet the needs around you? Let me challenge you. Let's be generous, if for anything, because he has been generous toward us. That alone is enough of a reason. Now, there's one more though, because it turns out that there's an added benefit. And it goes all the way back to this verse that we've been looking at in this series, or at least the verse after. So the verse we've been looking at is chapter 6, verse 18 in Timothy. It says this, command them to do good, to be rich in good deeds, and to be generous and willing to share. But I want you to look at what it says in the very next verse, verse 19. It says, in this way, they will lay up treasure for themselves as a firm foundation for the coming age, so that they may take hold of life that is truly life. That somehow this way of living, that being generous and willing to share, actually leads to more than we ever could have given up. You see, here's what I know at the end of the day. You can't outgive God. You just can't. It's who he is. He's generous and willing to share. And it's who we're called to be as well. Yeah? Yeah. Let me pray for you. God, we love you. We thank you so much that you first loved us. Thank you that when we were broke, busted, and desperately in need, God, you stepped in and were generous and willing to share. God, help us as your people to be a reflection of who you are, to be generous and willing to share, and help meet the needs that we see around us. God, give us wisdom about how to do that. But God, also give us the courage to do it. We love you. Thank you that you first loved us. In Jesus' name, amen. Hey, everybody. Love you. See you next week.
What a powerful question. What can I do to meet a need? I love how simple that question is. I love that there isn't some asterisk behind the question qualifying who exactly we meet that need for. See a need, meet a need. If you haven't signed up to serve at a project yet or to serve in your community, please make sure that you do that. You can do that right now through the Hub. And remember, it's the only way to get a Red for Philly t-shirt, so don't miss out. Also, during this series, we're memorizing a scripture verse together. So before we go, we're gonna do it together. Ready? 3, 2, 1. Command them to do good, to be rich in good deeds, and to be generous and willing to share. 1 Timothy 6:18. Well done. Hey, that verse is exactly what we're doing through This Is Love, so keep up the good work. Well, it's been a great day today. If you haven't taken time to text in, be sure you do that. And before you go, would you take time to like, comment, subscribe, and share this with someone? It'll help to encourage more and more people. Hey, have a great rest of your week. Have a great week serving and loving people, and we'll see you right back here next week.